that will go onto our website. The meeting will be locked shortly for security purposes. All questions asked in the chat function facility will be collated and answered during the evening. If not, we'll do some answers for you later on. We'll quickly go through a branch news and update, IOSH news and update. Then we'll go through the main talk from Iona Nielsen, Senior Sustainability Manager at Formula E, and Matthew Elmer, the Environmental Safety Manager from Formula E World Championship. Then myself and John will do the Q&As, and then we'll have some final remarks. And just really, the main thing is, give us your questions, listen to what our speakers are talking about, because it should be really interesting, and let's have a great night. So some updates for you. We're still awaiting Privy Council approval for the new grades. IOSH conference is on next week, the 18th, the 20th and 24th, with corresponding workshops during the days between them, which should be really interesting. And again, there will be applications for new branch executive members will be accepted starting in February 2022. We have got some vacancies, but let the governance function send out the emails to you before you start applying. Meetings coming up. We've got a meeting on the 17th of February at 7 o'clock, Health and Safety Manager in the NHS, and that will be done by Sue Morgan and another from Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board. Should be really interesting. And then at the present moment, we are organising a face-to-face meeting on the 24th of March 2022, which will cover future leaders. We'll cover CPD, IPD, PRI panel, and IOSH Catch the Wave. Potentially it's at Coleg Llandrillo, but I've got to confirm for further details before we fully come back to you, and that will be an afternoon session from 2 until about 4:30. So again, as I said tonight, any questions, please, that you want to pose to speakers, put them in the chat function, and we will go through that when all the questions come in. And once they finish the presentation, we will then ask the questions appropriately. So tonight's topic is delivering sustainability events globally within a ISO20121 framework. Again, our friends from Formula E World Championship. So if I now stop sharing and then pass over to Iona and Matthew, and welcome and good luck.
Thank you so much. I think we could just do very quick introductions first to both of us, and then we will jump right into the presentation. So my name is Iona. I am the Senior Sustainability Manager for the Formula E Championship. I have been with the company almost 4 years now. My background is in more corporate sustainability with the likes of sort of McDonald's and Costa Coffee and corporate sustainability for consultancy. But I moved across to events and sustainability 4 years ago with Formula E, and I haven't looked back. So my competency is mainly on the environmental side. So I'm also a practitioner member of IEMA, and I mainly look after for the championship the carbon footprinting, data collection for life cycle assessment, and net zero carbon. As you'll see from the PowerPoint today, we'll give a really good overview of the entire sort of sustainability of the championship from a social and economic perspective as well. Over to Matt.
Hi, so welcome. I am Matthew Elmer, so I am the Health, Safety Environmental Manager at Formula E, sitting in, say, a separate team to Iona, but very, very closely working by Iona on anything to do with environmental management, environmental safety. So my background, so graduated university about 4 years ago, worked in construction to start with as an environmental manager, and then moved into health, safety and environmental manager role within a company called Kinetic within the Ministry of Defence. So my background is mainly to do with environmental management through training. Again, a member of IEMA, started now a recent new member of IOSH as well. And I've been within Formula E for 8 months now, joining Rick Bates' team, and mainly being on the environmental side of the health, safety and environmental team, but also supporting the health and safety function on the management system side of things as well. So health, safety and environmental management systems, and also supporting IONIA on the sustainability side from a health and safety point of view.
Lovely. So sustainability at Formula E. So Formula E is extremely unique in that 7 years ago it was founded with, sustainability uniquely in its DNA. So we exist to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles, and the benefit of electric vehicles being zero tailpipe emissions, and therefore they reduce air pollution. So since the very beginning, they've had a sustainability manager, and our team has continued to grow and grow. And we have continued to make sure that our sustainability competency is as strong and as credible as possible. So within that, we have our sustainability strategy overarching the entire sort of strategy and operations of the championship. And that's split into 4 pillars. So environmental excellence, which is about all of our UN pillars, aligning to net zero carbon, the sustainable event certifications, and really ensuring we have a really credible and approach to the environmental operations of our event, making sure that we minimise our impacts as much as possible. Leadership and innovation, this is making sure that we maintain our leadership position in elite sport for sustainability. So having all of our different accreditations and certifications, and really having that to make sure that our systems and framework is as robust as possible, and to make sure that we are one of the most sustainable sports, if not one of the most sustainable sport globally. Social progress is more of the social pillar, but just as important to us in Formula E, because we obviously race in city centres. We can be quite disruptive. It can be felt by our host cities. So we always try and give back wherever we are. So that's a really important pillar for us as well. And finally, creating value through values. So as we've been growing as a championship, we've also been seeing teams and partners actually coming on board for the sustainability aspects of the championship, because they really see value in that for their own brand and their own reputation. And so that's also an important pillar of our strategy also. So looking at the specific projects underneath each pillar, and this is what we'll go through in quite high level today. And obviously, if there's any more specific questions on any of these topics, feel free to put in the chat and we'll answer at the end. And we also released our latest sustainability report in December. That can be found on our website. So you can also find more information on that as well if you wanted to refer to that. So as I mentioned, under environmental excellence, this is where we have our net zero carbon approach and our set science-based targets, which we'll go into in a bit more detail shortly, our sustainable event certification and the UN alignments, which we'll also go across soon, leadership and innovation, accreditations, reporting, and also the Gen 3 car, which we will touch on a little bit today. Social progress being our UNICEF partnership, all of the different legacies that we do in the host cities, and also some of the FIA-related elements. And then finally, some examples from our teams, partners and suppliers on creating value through values through our championship. So we'll focus first of all on the environmental excellence pillar. So 2 years ago in September 2020, we announced that we were the first sport to achieve net zero carbon from inception. And that was a really big deal for us. We are still the first and only sport to have achieved this, and we're maintaining that as well, having also offset for season 7, and will continue to do so. So the way we've approached that, we've signed up to something called the UN Climate Neutral Now initiative, which is the UN approach to measure, reduce, and then offset your unavoidable emissions. So that just ensures that you follow this framework and that you have a really credible and verified approach to ensure that you are net zero, and that is verified by the UN as well. So that is what we've done. We have been measuring our life cycle assessment from the very beginning of the championship, from season 1. We've been improving that year on year as well, making sure that we're capturing not just environmental, but social and economic categories as well, to make that as robust as possible. We've been working with lots of different departments to try and reduce our impacts as much as possible. And then that's when we achieved, well, in season 6, we then went through the offsetting process to offset those unavoidable emissions. So our projects, you can see a short recap here, but we aimed to cover most, if not all, of our host cities in which we race, because we want to bring environmental and social benefits to all of the host cities that we race. We focus very much on renewable energy projects, because that's obviously in our DNA, given that we are an electric vehicle championship, and that we also focus quite heavily on renewable energy transition in the Formula E Championship. And they are also UN, so they're either gold standard or verified by the UN again. So they are the strongest level of projects that you can invest in, and they're verified, so they're also very credible. We also were the very first sport this year we announced to set a science-based target, and that is approved by the Science Based Target Initiative. So we have set two targets, although overall we've committed to reduce 45% by 2030. Within that, with scope 1 and 2, we are going to be reducing our emissions by 60% by 2030. So through that, we will focus very much again on making sure that we achieve 100% renewable energy powered for the entire championship. So that isn't just the car charging or anything. It will be the e-village, the hospitality, the entire paddock, the broadcast. So everything related to our event will eventually be powered by renewable energy. And scope 3, we will be reducing by 27.5% by 2030. So there we will focus majority on our freight. So freight is the biggest impact to Formula E, of course, because we travel a lot of cars around the world, unfortunately. But that we're working very closely with DHL to transition that also to biofuels, to move away from air freight as much as possible and utilise sea and road where we can. And also just optimizing packaging and ensuring that the vehicles are as full as possible. So that's net zero carbon. Renewable energy, as I mentioned, we have this ambition, and also we have hold ourselves accountable to this by having set the science-based targets. We're also an ambassador of the climate group's EV100 programme and RE100 programme, which again gives even more sort of credibility to our approach to ensure that, you know, we will achieve 100% renewable energy. We already are at 100% renewable energy to power our cars and also our headquarters, and we are transitioning at the moment to cover our entire events in all of our different host cities as well. And we have a roadmap which we have set out in order to achieve that. We're focusing very much on hydrogenated vegetable oils, which is basically used cooking oil to sort of power our events, because that's one of the most sustainable fuels that you can to power. So this is an overview of our carbon footprint. So season 7, it was in total 19,600 tonnes of CO2. This is actually slightly less than season 6, which is a surprise considering, you know, we only actually managed to finish half of the season, had a very big break, and then 6 races in Berlin in August to finish that season. But that is majority due to the fact that we had to have a lot more double headers because, you know, we were still going through a pandemic and needed to make sure that we finished the season. But also we had very little to no spectators for the entire season. So we saw a lot of a reduction in spectator travel and food and drinks as well. But as you can see, very first impact, and this we have felt since the very beginning of the seasons, 74% freight. But as I mentioned, this is because, you know, our calendar, it's not quite as optimized as F1's. We don't quite have the luxury of being able to choose when we go to the events. I would love for it to be a bit more regionally clustered and not to be 2 weeks apart, but we can't have everything. So we have to focus on other ways like the sort of biofuels, the differing modes of transport that are more sustainable, and optimizing packaging and routes as much as we can to try and reduce that instead. So we're working very closely with our official logistics partner DHL on that. The next one is staff travel. So even though we actually only travel our race critical staff, we do still have that at 13% because that's probably about 130 people per race. But that actually has slightly reduced because the pandemic has also, well, made us have a bit more of a skeleton team, and also given some COVID cases as well, some teams had to go with just one person, which was quite difficult. But we, you know, it makes you realise that you can deliver the events with slightly less people. So that has actually reduced as well in season 7. And we're looking at reducing that further and relying more on local teams as well, instead of the sort of core Formula E teams to travel as well. 8% is operations. So that has stayed very stable throughout the whole, like from season 1, which is a surprise considering that the scale of the events actually is growing as well, because not only are we looking at the sort of renewable energy transition, but we're always working with the power team to try and optimize as much as possible the different areas, reducing actually the amount of generators we have on site, but also reducing the loads on them and reducing the power consumption of them as well as much as we can. So that's actually stayed quite consistent. That also includes things like waste and water, which aren't huge impacts to us. Obviously, we work on those as impacts as well, but that's also stayed fairly consistent. Food and drinks, again, this has been reduced because of spectators, and the same for spectators travel below, because we did not have we had very little spectators. We had some in Berlin, some in Mexico, and I believe that's it, maybe some in London as well in the grandstands, compared to, well, when that's 14 races and only three with spectators, that's a very big reduction to normal numbers. The final one is the car. So we carried out the life cycle assessment of the car and the battery in season 5. So that's a consistent 1% until we have the Gen 3 car, because we will need to then do that process again. But that covers the entire life cycle assessment, from like the creation of the car all the way to the disposal. So all of the different elements, the chassis, the tyres, the battery, everything. We're very unique. We were the very first, again, championship to include that within our life cycle assessment. And as I mentioned, we will also be doing that for the Gen 3 car as well, which is the next one that will be released. Some other ways that we are reducing our event footprint, and this is, we've already covered some of them, and I'll let Matt focus more on the environmental operations of our event. But as I mentioned with freight, and those are the sort of methods that we're using with DHL to try and reduce as much as possible. Waste, so we ensure we have a very robust waste management process. We make sure that we recycle in all of our different events, and we have things like recycling ranges in the sort of spectator areas where there's high footfall to ensure that people are recycling properly. So we'll have that at all of the different races. We're also trying to phase out the use of single-use plastics. We started with hydration stations and reusable pouches back in season 5. We're now looking at branding as the sort of next stage of our phasing out of single-use plastics. We now have completely PVC-free trackside branding, and for those who don't know, PVC is not recyclable. So by transitioning to PVC-free already, that makes it recyclable. And we're also looking at relying more on sort of reusable trackside branding as much as possible. For food and beverage, so we always have minimum 30% vegetarian options. That's a requirement for the food and beverage vendors in all of our host cities. We also ensure that that's locally or seasonally sourced where possible to try and reduce the footprint. What we also insist on is either recyclable or compostable packaging, and obviously no single-use plastics, so you won't see straws. If you see cups, they'll be compostable or biodegradable cups. They will not be single-use plastic cups. Just to try and really have that consistent phasing out of single-use plastics on site, because that's one of the most visible things that you can see. Suppliers, so we don't just, do this for ourselves. We really want to try and work with our suppliers on these common shared sustainability goals, and we often need their support and input into this to make these decisions, like with the branding. So we're working with the supplier as CSM. So we need the sort of buy-in and support from our suppliers in order to achieve these things. So with other suppliers, we've introduced unique sort of sustainability KPIs. We've created our own sustainable procurement policy and questionnaire, which goes out with all tenders, and then we review these when they come back. So sustainability now has an input in quite a lot of our global tenders. Hopefully we will expand it to even further than that, but I think the problem is the resource at the moment and the small teams, but where it really is a big impact in terms of global tenders, that's where we will support. And transportation, so we are a no parking event for spectators, and we will use our sort of communication channels to encourage people to take public transport. We will showcase the local maps and like the timetables so that they know how they can get to our event. A little bit more on the Gen 2 cars and about the sort of the life cycle assessment of these. So from season 7, we now also recycle the carbon fibre from our cars. So all of those broken parts that come off of the cars when they're crashing in all of the races, we collect this and then we will freight this back where we can via road when there's like a space in the logistics freight to the UK, and we found a supplier that will recycle that into non-woven products, and we will be looking at repurposing that for something else in the championship, whether that will be trophies or some giveaways of some sort. But we are now collecting that as part of also our waste management approach. all the batteries are given a second life. So Gen 1 batteries, we worked with Umicore to recycle those and to sort of take out the sort of metal elements because they were reused. All season 7 batteries, they're still in use until season 8 starts. Until then McLaren will take them back and they will still be reused. So we really try to make sure that the batteries always have an end of life. If they can either be made into things like battery storage because they're still, still usable, and if they're not, then taking out those elements that can still be like valuable to people. And tyres, so we work very closely with Michelin. That's not a very good pronunciation. Sorry if anybody is French, but we've reduced the tyre allocation year on year. The tyres are already a hybrid model, so we don't have to bring 5 different sets of tyres for different weathers or road conditions or temperatures. The tyre works all in all weathers. And it's 100% recyclable. So Michelin will bring these tyres to the event, they will be used and then collected back up at the end and taken away. And this is often recycled into things like the children's playgrounds or things like that. The Gen 3 car, so this is a very exciting concept. This will be the first sort of sustainable motorsport car that exists. We've been working very closely with the FIA, with Spark, to design this really with sustainability in mind. And it will really see like a big change from Gen 2 in terms of not just the design, because obviously you can see from the image there it already looks very different. People have said it looks a bit like a Batmobile. I'll let you decide if that looks like the Batmobile. But it will maintain being net zero carbon. So the Gen 2 already is, but we will maintain that. The same with carbon fibre, so we'll make sure that all of those broken parts are collected up and recycled. We are working with a new tyre supplier for the Gen 3 car, and the pioneering process will deliver 26% sustainable materials into the tyres. So that's taking the tyres one step further. The tyres will already be made from 26% recycled materials. It will also have a more effective engine, over 90% more effective than Gen 2. And all of the suppliers we'll be using for the Gen 3 car will be held to strict KPIs on sustainability. And they will also have to achieve something called the FIA 3-star environmental certification, which Matt will allude to a little bit. We also have, under environmental excellence, a partnership with specifically UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme. So we became an ambassador of their Beat Air Pollution campaign in 2017, and we actually renewed that just this last season. So it's a really good partnership for us because Beat Air Pollution it's all about them raising awareness of urban air pollution and the ways to improve it. And obviously one of the main ways of improving that is transitioning to electric vehicles. So it's a very good partnership for us, and we try and activate it at quite a lot of our races. We also have Lucas Degrassi, who you can see on the right here. He is one of the UN Clean Air advocates. So we use him in a lot of communication campaigns and also generally to talk about sustainability and to really talk about the ethos of the championship and why we exist. We're also a signatory of something called the UNFCCC Sports for Climate Action Programme. So this is specifically from the UNFCCC for sporting events, and this holds sport events accountable to making sure that they have an environmental management sort of process in place, and that they are going to be, considering the Paris Agreement, the target of the 1.5 degree scenario, and that they're going to try and be below that. The requirement of that is that you have to look at this framework and report on it annually to make sure that you have a process in place to ensure that you are meeting these principles, and you have to report it publicly. So you can find that on our website. It's also good because we have we have meetings with all of the other sports within this. So there are things like the IOC, FIFA, UEFA, NBA. We have best practice sharing sessions where we talk about, what we're introducing into our events and how we are achieving things and sharing, this best practice. An example from our last session was the fact that we actually collate our spectator travel and include that within our life cycle assessment, which is actually quite difficult. Well, it's unheard of because it's very difficult to track. So we shared, the way that we do it in that we collect data from our fans when they arrive on the site, and we ask them for the information on how they've got to the site in terms of modes of transport, length of time travelled, and then we can actually work out work out this information. The next section will be leadership and innovation, and I will hand over to Matt to talk a little bit more about this environmental side.
Perfect. So so from the leadership innovation side, so we've been ISO 20121 certified since 2016 in that season 4 Formula E. So ISO 20121, if you don't know, is the ISO standards for sustainable event management. So it covers basically anything to do with the event itself, from anything from the health and safety side of things and the management system to our lifecycle assessment. So it looks at it from a full broad scale, from procurement all the way through to event delivery and further beyond. And we're now 2012-1 certified across the whole organisation as well. So in season 3, we started with a single certification of one event, and then we then developed that to the full championship. So we're the first motorsport championship to be ISO 2012-1 certified, as we were. And various other sports organisations are now 2012-1 certified, such as Olympic Games, for example, who were the first organisation to do that. So 2012-1 as a business is now it's embedded in the business. We've had it for 5 years. We've had the recertification this year, and it went very successfully. And it's ingrained in the way that people think about things in the business. So prioritise about minimisation of our carbon footprint, and it's at the forefront of everything we do. And also within the health and safety side of the business, that's also very much a key element of that, especially on the operational control side, which I'll talk about a bit more later in the presentation. Complementing our ISO 2012-1 certification, we've also got the FIA environmental accreditation, which I already mentioned earlier. So within the FIA, there's a 3-star, there's 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star environmental accreditation, which is basically their own third-party accreditation for environmental excellence within motorsport and events. And with 1-star being the very bare minimum, which is sort of like aimed at local sports clubs and events and motorsport, through to 3-star, which is aimed at world championship level sort of certification. So we're currently the only championship that certifies a 3-star environmental excellence, but there is further targets for other championships such as F1 to go to that. So it's something that's we're very proud to have, and also be leading on that. Also within the environmental accreditation, as we move forward to season 9, our Gen 3 car, all teams that participate in the World Championship will have to be certified to this standard. So it's something that's it's become a lot more prevalent than motorsport. It's thinking about sustainability, environmental, and also linking health and safety to that. And the FIA are very keen on leading that and putting it at the forefront of companies' minds and championships' minds. And also to complement these 2 accreditations, we've got our health, safety and environmental management system, which is integrated within the ISO 20121 Framework, that us as a health and safety function support the sustainability team on, which I'll talk about a bit more later as well. Perfect. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of sort of like our environmental management, so how we do that within the organisation, how we do that particularly at events. So our operational environmental management is very much embedded in our health, safety and environmental management system. It's how we manage events, how we reduce our impact on the events, and also how we improve going forward in terms of our environmental excellence. So the way we set about this is by implementing processes and procedures to cover our key environmental aspects and impacts. So as an organisation, our aspects and impacts are very much to do with sort of the construction side of environmental and safety management. So a lot of people think, events industry, Formula E, we're running a world championship, but a lot of people don't realise that we're actually running a big construction company, as well as delivering on the corporate side, the TV rights of the championship, and also the event management side as well. So we're different to other event series really, where we build all racetracks from scratch in city centres. So anything from civil works through to branding, working at height, it's very much a broad spectrum. And in terms of the environmental side of things, it can cause certain challenges. So our biggest risk environmentally really is to do with spillages from plant machinery, for example. So it's a big problem we've had in the past is we operate in lots of different areas of the world, lots of different challenges, and we have to put key procedures in place to manage that. So one big area that we've done a lot of development on recently is on spills management, and also communicating that to our local teams as well. So the way our events are run, sometimes we are the promoter of the event, we're responsible for the event, we pretty much lead on that event, but other events we do in conjunction with partners in promoters in cities where they might carry out some of the work before we started there, and and they manage contractors as well. So it'll be a mixture between the local team in the city, the actual city itself, or the sponsoring organisation, and Formula E. So it can be, it's quite a unique challenge, but something that we've learned and built on over the years. So in terms of, so sort of just to summarise the environmental side, we basically, it's construction management in terms of how we manage it. Waste spillage is our big sort of key element, and also obviously encouraging recycling, which we sort of given a lot of examples about earlier. And also, so we're currently working towards 14001 ISO 14001, which is the environmental ISO standard, and hopefully we'll achieve that in the next few years. And so our overarching aim is to strengthen our environmental management process in response to comply with our 2012 standard. So just to give a bit of an overview in terms of more the health and safety side, so the remit of our health and safety team, a lot of people on the outside might think we're responsible for the cars, we're responsible for the racing, the actual event itself, but actually, in terms of how remit for health and safety, we cover pretty much anything from the build of the event, as I say, through to the crowd management side of the event, but the actual racing side of the event with the cars sits with the FIA, and track safety sits with the FIA and stewarding marshalling. So as a team, we support the corporate function of the business, so that's general office safety, safety of the employees, well-being of the employees, working closely with HR on that side of things, and then also supporting the event delivery side. So we're sort of split as a team between operational safety and corporate safety. So so in terms of other sort of safety side of things, we're responsible for logistics, fire safety, so construction safety. So CDM is a very big part of how we implement safety at our events. So we enshrine CDM to all our processes and procedures, and that's how we manage our contractors on site across the globe. So we use UK legislation as a pinnacle point for minimum standards that we set for our contractors across the globe, and then we ensure that that the local teams follow that, and as a health and safety function, we support that with the help of consultants around the globe. So building a functional health and safety management system. So health and safety in Formula E started about back in, within the first couple of seasons with just a one-man band team with, as you probably know, Rick Bates, who's as part of your part of the IOSH group and vice president of IOSH now. And the way the management system started is sort of like based on HSG 65, so a foundation for sort of event management from health and safety, developing processes and procedures to ensure that our events were health and safety compliant and we could achieve the appropriate permits for our events. And then it moved from more of a culture shift from developing processes and procedures to understanding awareness of health and safety within the business. So that's through the delivery of IOSH working safety courses to employees, IOSH managing safety to the leadership team, and just trying to get a sort of fundamental balance of health and safety within an organisation that is very young. So we're as an organisation, we're only 7-8 years old as an organisation, so that can bring many challenges from a health and safety and environmental point of view. So it's very key that we build that base and knowledge base of health and safety, and then implement a management system that's workable for people. So as I said earlier, CGM is very much a sort of key way that we manage our system. Alice Jones, as you know, is on the call as well, is a CDM consultant, and she does a lot of work on making sure that we're CDM compliant. It's something that's been brought into the management system within a couple of years since Alice has joined, and it's been really effective in managing our contractors and reducing our accident frequency rate. So last season, for example, we only had one lost time injury across over 300,000 working days on site. So that sort of gives you an example of how many, the broad spectrum that we have to manage. So over 4,000 people, for example, the Diria race currently, there's been over 4,000 contractors on site. So it's a very big construction project as well as an event as well. So as managers, we have to have a management system that can cope with that and also cope with the corporate function as well. So as I say, we've developed the management system, then we developed these health and safety standards across the globe, and then we implement that across the globe through event specifications and through the use of local contractors in certain events, and also the corporate function based in the office here in London between the four of us, and also supporting the events as well. As I say, environmental management has been embedded into the health, safety and environmental management system. And to be green and everything, it's a completely online-based system which our users can be used across the world, and we share it with our contractors as well, and they can access certain parts of our management system. So there's freely available information across the globe and across different contractors, from local to global contractors. And we're currently working towards 45,001 certification. And hopefully, we had stage 1 last week, and hope to have achieve full ISO certification this season. And finally, just a very quick sort of summary on our operational readiness. So we're a core team of 4 members. with support from Iona on the sustainability side, and also the support of local consultants. So we provide very key areas of expertise from CDM through to environmental management. It's a big remit within a small team, and we have to react very quickly to situations, because when the event starts, it can be 7 weeks from build to finish, but when that race day is set, those cars will leave that track. Well, that track has to be ready at that time on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. So we have, as a health and safety team, we have to ensure that we operate a safe event, but also, make sure that the build goes ahead and we stick to schedule. So it can be a bit different from like my previous background in the Ministry of Defence. We had the safety issue that we could stop work there for a few days or a couple of weeks and resolve it. In Formula E, we've got to come and think of solutions that are safe and very quickly. It's a matter of minutes or hours to ensure that we can still keep the build going. And as I say, we've got global competency, global consultants, and we've also got departmental champions as well that support us. So we've now supporting. So we now put a lot of our employees on the level 6 NCRQ course to ensure that we've got greater levels of competency within the business, and they support the team from a delivery perspective. And as I say, we're involved in every aspect of the event, from planning through to delivery and dealing with the event, and we work very closely with the sustainability team.
Thanks, Matt. So we just have the other two pillars left. These are a little bit shorter, so don't worry, we won't keep you too much longer. So as I mentioned, social progress is just as significant to us, the sort of social pillar, as environment, although people always assume that environment is the biggest one. Our most significant element of the sort of social progress pillar is our UNICEF partnership. So this past season, we announced a 3-year deal with UNICEF, where we will contribute £3 million to something called a Safe and Healthy Environment Fund. And this will benefit 3 million children across this 3-year period. And it will contribute to education and awareness with them on climate resilience. So we're really, safeguarding the next generation and informing them of, the climate change that is real and how they can be well equipped to, go into their adult life and continue the fight on that. So that's a really significant partnership, and we have 4 key markets globally: Mexico, Rome, New York and London, where we activate this partnership at our events as well as obviously digitally across the season on our channels. We've also supported, there's 2 FIA initiatives. The first one is Smart Cities, which is a conferencing initiative, which of course has moved digitally over the past season or 2, given the global pandemic. But it is smart mobility conferences. It brings together a lot of high-level sort of government officials, businesses, some of our teams and partners, and also Formula E C-level, to really discuss new technologies, sustainable mobility, to discussing, within our host cities, how they are transitioning to smart mobility, and really sharing those ideas and best practice, and stimulating conversations around that. It's split into 3 areas. So the conferencing forum element, they also host a startup startup contest in each of the host cities, which supports entrepreneurs, and they get the opportunity to portray what their startups are and get investments into them to drive them forward, and also legacy, so building the capacity and expertise for long-lasting outcomes. So we often host these 2 or 3 times a season, and in the backdrop normally of Formula E events when we can have people on site. Alternatively, so Girls on Track, this is more of a gender equality initiative. So obviously the gender balance in motorsport is very well known, especially like these days. And this is an initiative that was founded by the FIA quite a few years ago and was amalgamated with Susie Walsh charity Dare to Be Different, in order to inspire and educate young girls between the ages of 8 and 18 into the sort of the realm of motorsport, but not just that you can be a race driver, so not just giving them the experience and skills of karting and simulators, but also exposing them to all of the other different careers that you might be able to come into in motorsport. So examples like journalism, road safety, nutrition and health, STEM, air quality, sustainability. I should probably have said that one first, shouldn't I? But it really gives them, exposes them to all of these different elements. Again, we try and host this at a couple of our different races per season, so they can also experience things like the pit lane and meet some of our drivers, and also see how the Formula E ecosystem works as well. More generally, for each host city, so as I mentioned, we are quite disruptive as an event. So we have a community engagement strategy, which is generic, but we make this tailored and bespoke for each host city. So we'll work with our local points of contact in the same way that Matt will have one on health and safety. We would have one on for like local communities. They're normally like marketing, communications and communities. So we can really understand the local needs and expectations of the stakeholders, where the disruption is felt the most, and how we can really make a difference in that local community. And then we will tailor that approach to suit that host city so that we'll ensure that we have as much impact as possible in a positive way. This includes things like legacy projects, so whether we can invest in like electric vehicle chargers, or in Mexico, for instance, we rebuilt an Olympic park after it was destroyed by an earthquake. In Paris, for instance, we redid some lighting, some LED lighting, so some elements like that. Working with local charities, so finding some local charities and inviting them to our events, so whether they can exhibit in our e-village to showcase what their mission is and how that other people can help them. Educating communities, so we often will invite them to have a unique behind the scenes experience before it's open to the public so that they can see behind the scenes. And finally, engaging local communities via outreach and volunteer programs as well. So giving them the opportunity also to work at our event, and, you know, get some behind the scenes experience that way as well. The final one is creating value through values. So one of the other unique things about Formula E is that we're a platform for our ecosystem to test and implement their ideas. So starting with partners, and some really great examples on the right here, but we work really closely with them to try and understand what their own sustainability goals and missions are, where it aligns with Formula E, and how we can implement that at our event and also on our social channels, so like digitally and physically, because that not only it strengthens our own approach and reach, but it also helps their own brand. Some examples here include, so the DHL Go Green olive tree planting initiative. So we did this in Valencia in season 7. So when we couldn't have spectators, we filled grandstand with native olive trees to Valencia instead, so that it wasn't empty. And then we donated these to the circuit afterwards, but also to the local city as well. So they are now planted and are growing in Valencia. So that was a really nice legacy. It was native trees endemic to that region. And it's something that, you know, we can give back, we can continue to do if we go back there for testing as well. I've already mentioned, I think, the hydration stations and the greener bar. So these are some other great examples of where partners have brought their initiatives onto our track, and it's also helped drive our own sustainability ambitions. So with the hydration stations allowing us to reduce the use of single-use plastics on site, and the Heineken Greener Bar doing exactly the same, and really showcasing what you can create with, you know, a really circular approach to activating, basically. And then finally, the Julius Baer and Bosch Pole Position Trophy, which is 3D printed, which is a more environmentally efficient way of printing. And it was aligned to the UN SDGs, so it was showcasing different sustainable development goals and how we can contribute. So this one, for instance, is renewable energy, and that was obviously really appropriate for our event. In the same way, we're also a platform for our teams, and that there are manufacturers behind our teams, and they are often coming into the championship to use us as a test bed, as a platform for testing their electric vehicle technologies, for improving the efficiency generally of the cars, but also the range of the batteries, etc. And we've actually seen some real results from them doing that. An example is the support series that we had, the Jaguar I-Pace E-Trophy, where they actually managed to improve the battery range by 19 kilometres just by being involved in the championship for one season. And that then obviously trickles down into their domestic EVs. So by teams being involved in our championship, that's actually benefiting and transitioning the technology even faster in the electric vehicle market. And then they all get these benefits from being involved in the championship, and it's a very symbiotic relationship. So that's it from us. I hope that it was useful and interesting for you. And I think I would be handing back to Richard now, I guess, for the Q&A section. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Well, what can I say? I mean, that was quite a very quick view of the Formula E World Championship, but I was highly impressed. My God, you're doing so much. I
There's a
mean,
lot I learned about there as well, and I work for the company. I was
okay.
like, wow, we do that as well.
And what are Formula One doing? Can I ask that?
Not even a quarter as much.
My God.
Yeah.
And what about Extreme E? Are you involved in Extreme E or?
No, so the Sustainability Director within Formula E is an advisor for Extreme E. So we are helping in terms of their strategic approach and how they're delivering, but they're very much in their infancy with their sustainability strategy. I think they've got their communications bang on, and I think their legacy program is very strong. But I think in terms of actually delivering their events sustainably, I think they've still got a bit of a journey ahead of them.
And they're a separate company. They're actually a separate company, so we're separate entities, albeit under the same sort of group. We're separate businesses, so we have obviously collaboration, but we don't work. They're separate in terms of the functions are separate.
Okay. And can I ask, what cars do you drive?
I don't, so I'm the most sustainable one in the room.
Oh, you use transport?
Yeah, I live in London, so it's impossible. Well, it's not impossible, but I don't need a car.
I plan to go electric, but whilst I've got my own flat, I can't get a charging point in there, so there's still challenges with the vehicle. So I'm still using the Volkswagen I had 7 years ago. It's still quite sustainable. It's got good mileage for what it is, but it's not hybrid or electric, which I want to have in the future.
Okay, and your offices are in Hammersmith, aren't they?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. All right, let's look at some questions then. And we certainly have some. But I'm open to anybody else putting questions in. I'm quite happy about it. So we had this man called Rick who put some questions in. I think you know about him anyway. So I mean, he said, okay, so you mentioned that Formula E suppliers are measured against Formula E sustainability, but do you review how
The race team sustainability
how the race teams cope, how they comply?
Yeah, so by us putting in our ISO20121 framework, they generally comply to an extent anyway. For instance, the waste recycling and management processes we put in on site, how they need to manage spills. So generally, we will keep up with them in terms of that framework. At the moment, there is nothing in place that's a requirement for them to have any environmental management system. We do know that I think about 80% of our race teams do have one. But as Matt mentioned, so there is a requirement by season 9, the Gen 3 era, for all teams to have 3-star environmental accreditation of the FIA, which is the equivalent of the motorsport equivalent of 14,001. So this means that they will be a requirement that they need to have a management system in place for environment, and that they will have that framework, that minimum level of framework that all teams should be following.
But I saw in your report also you're looking at implementing 14,001 as well, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah. So at the moment, we already have 14,001. Sorry, not 14. The FIA environmental accreditation, which isn't entirely. It's very similar to 14,001, but not entirely the same. So yes, the next step for us, once we've achieving 2012 45,001, we're also looking at 9,001, and then we will, I think, look at 14,001. So we have the full suite.
Okay.
But we do have an environmental management system in place. It's just that we haven't aligned it completely to 14 yet. It's a migration over time.
Yeah.
So obviously the focus at the moment, the original focus, as I say, was the sustainability element of it. And then now we're looking at health and safety, and then moving on to environmental and quality. But as you say, 2012-1 covers a lot of clauses of 14, so it's almost a hybrid version of 14,001.
Yeah, that's why we haven't done it until now, because there isn't a requirement to. It's often recognised as one and the same, because it's basically 2012-1 is amalgamation of things like 14,001, 9,001, and other ones like it's specifically on procurement and community engagement as well.
Okay. All right, next one. This is a really good one for Matthew, really. How do you control your contractors to a competent standard? That's probably a big question, really. It
is a big question, and we do a lot on it as well. So Alice might correct me on this one, but no. So basically, we have a quite rigorous contractor onboarding process. So as a business, we have global contractors and local contractors. Some our global contractors will, support us across the season, across many events, multiple events. Whereas the local side of things, they might only be there for that one event. So for the global ones, we work with procurement. We have your onboarding process where you fill out your health and safety track record. If there's been any non-conformities in the past, legal action, and it's based on a rating system of that. Once that's been put to contract, then we get involved again, and then we'll sit down with the contractor and go through their health and safety documentation and performance before getting a sign-off to come onto site for that season. So that's looking for everything from like liability insurance, RAMs, ways of working, performance from the. So if they've already been onboarded previously, it's how they performed the previous season, and it's a forum they can interact with us as well and say where we're, if they've got any concerns or any observations about how we're managing them from a safety perspective. So it works both ways.
Okay.
And then for local contractors, we have a different system, which basically it's so our local team generally will appoint these contractors. So for our e-village, which is like our sort of is our fan experience area, we get activations from our corporate partners. So like Mercedes, Nissan, for example, will put a stand in. And for that, we'll do an onboarding process again, where it's working with their agency and the local team to get the appropriate documentation in place. So it'll be a review from us, a review from the contract manager, and then a review from the event management experience side. And until all three of us have signed and looked at every bit of paperwork and signed it off, that person can't come onto site. And then obviously, once we're on site, there's the overview and monitoring process as well.
Okay. All right, next question. How are you going to reduce the impact of sea freight on the championship? And that's probably a big question. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Well,
there, Iona.
Well, sea freight is already 100 times less carbon intensive than air freight. So it's not one of our biggest issues, really. It's actually what we want to move to entirely, because obviously it's less intensive. But what we are looking at doing is using biofuels instead. So at the moment, we're not there yet in terms of completely sea freight. We're actually looking with DHL at carbon insetting of what we take via sea freight, because actually that's the best case scenario. If we travelled all of our freight by sea freight 100%, then that would take our footprint down massively. So actually, in the best case scenario, all of my freight would be sea freight.
Okay, but again, as you said before, it's difficult in your type of the program you've got compared to Formula One, because Formula One tried to market in either the Middle East, the Asia, or we have it in Europe. A lot of the races, they try and bring them together, don't they?
Yeah, and unfortunately, obviously, the benefit of sea freight is the carbon emissions, but the downfall is the time it takes. So we often don't have the luxury of waiting 8 weeks for it to go from New York all the way to Saudi Arabia. Like, we would not have that time. So that's what often dictates the way we travel our freight, because obviously it's not always just about sustainability we're talking about. It's actually a lot cheaper to also freight via the sea instead of air freight. So actually, it's in everybody's best interest. Even the finance team would be agreeing with me, saying we should do sea freight. So it's also in everybody's best interest. So when we can really optimize that calendar fully, and hopefully we'll get to that sort of maturity level stage. But at the moment, we often just get a sort of choice of one or maybe 2 dates per year from a city. And we have to, that defines our calendar, and then that's what defines our footprint mainly.
Okay. Another question from Francis Wallington. What data is collected for your carbon cycle?
I mean, it's quite complicated, but in trying to do it in short, it's everything in terms of waste, water, food and beverage, humans, staff travel, suppliers, freight, and all our other suppliers. There's probably things that I'm missing. Obviously, the cars and batteries.
Everything.
Literally everything. So we haven't yet fully got to all of our suppliers in our supply chain, but yeah, we're very much in our maturity level of our carbon footprinting, and we work with some external consultants called Qantas, who basically help us to develop our data collection further, make it even more reliable and accurate. And then they're the ones that do the carbon footprinting. So it's like a third party verified way, and they use the sort of specific GHG methodology and they basically are the experts, and then we just provide all of the data to them, which we collect internally.
Okay, and you see, I mean, I know you probably showed it.
Yeah.
You've showed a reduction in your carbon footprint, an ongoing reduction on your carbon footprint.
At the moment, yes, but we can't take that too much for granted because we've had 2 seasons impacted by COVID.
Yeah.
So yes, we've seen a reduction at the moment, but we're not actively communicating about that because we know that the next season where we're fully operational again and back to pre-COVID levels, it will go back up. And actually, historically, before COVID, the footprint was still increasing because the scope of the championship and the calendar is increasing. So our focus now, because obviously we've set ourselves science-based targets, we're hoping that we're sort of getting to a status now where we are sort of consistent, that we won't go above sort of season 5 baseline levels. That's what we've based our science-based targets on. So we've looked at historically the normal scenario of the Formula E Championship and the footprinting, and then the reduction will be based on that. So although we have seen a reduction now, it probably won't stay until we make those genuine reductions on our science-based targets. So likely the renewable energy and the freight that we're working on. But we've got until 2030 for that. So maybe I'll say in 9 years.
Time.
Yeah.
Okay, and we've got another question from Jamie Banks. Is with the DHL Go green olive tree planting, won't those need to be removed when spectators are allowed back at the event?
Yes, so they were removed from the grandstand straight after when they were planted. So they were only in the grandstand during the event as spectators. They're now, if you go to, I think it's the Circuit Ricardo Tormo, again, I'm really bad with the pronunciations, but they're now in the grounds of the circuit and also on some roundabouts actually in Valencia.
And they've also got orange trees as well, and the oranges are delicious. So we had pre-season testing there this year, and we got a delivery to our office.
Even better.
Yeah,
and as I'll tell everybody, the presentation you did tonight will be available as a PDF file on our microsite, if that's okay with yourselves.
Yes, I'll send it to you after this.
That'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
Oh, I have one.
Oh, go on, Alice.
2 minutes, Alice.
Okay, in a few sentences, what do you see sustainability looking like for Formula E in the future?
Oh, that's a great question. Do you know what? I actually see myself talking myself out of a job. What I hope to see in 10 years is that it's so embedded into this organisation that, you know, you don't need us anymore to give direction, because I think until we've achieved our science-based targets, we're then going to go one step further and be completely carbon neutral instead of just net zero carbon from inception. And then I don't actually know that we're going to run out of things to actually do, because we're the world's first net zero, the world's first with SBTs. So yeah.
There you go. Well, that's a great way to end, eh?
Exactly.
I do think there'll be more for you to do anyway. Don't worry.
I think so. Yeah. I know. I don't think that they're going to let me go anytime soon.
I think your boss won't let you do that.
No, I don't think so either. I think Rick will let me do that.
One of you.
No,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree. Okay, so Matthew, what a great night. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I'll do my final bits and pieces. If I can share my screen with you all. Let me just do this. Here we go. So I hope you all enjoyed the session. Thank you for taking time to attend. Thank you to Ian and Matthew for coming along with all the intents of sharing your knowledge and experience with us. There will be, after the meeting, there will be a short survey sent out to everybody who's attended. Please give your feedback. We need to know what you want to, and what you thought of the talk. And really, from my side, stay safe, well, and connected. And then finally, these are our sort of links to our LinkedIn site, etc., etc. And then finally, I'd like to say, I wouldn't like to say that. I'd like to just say thanks for your ongoing support, and have a nice night. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. All right.
Richard.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye,
Cheers.
everyone. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Great.
Really excellent, that, guys.
Really good. Enjoy the pub.
If only.